To dear Reverend Swamiji, it's wonderful to meet you again after meeting you in Cambodia many years ago at the Hindu-Buddhist Summit, which was wonderful. To Honorable Justice Kumar, great to have you here. Dr. Mohan for organizing 4 days of hectic events in Bangalore, 12 events in 4 days, and a great team of volunteers. And Dr. Kannan, who's translated my book, Being Different, which is going to be launched today. And namaskar to all of you for coming here. This is my 4th book. So before I discuss the 4th book, Indra's Net, I'll just give you quick what are the previous 3 to set the stage. I've been full-time for 20 years, involved in this project to understand my civilization, my dharmic civilization, to partly the result of inner sadhana, study of our texts, discussion with people in the spirit of Purva Paksh and Uttar Paksh debates, educating, teaching our youth, our scholars, our professors, arguing with the media, doing all these things in order to enrich myself and share this knowledge. And of course, I'm accused of going out of my way to look for trouble. Yeah? And that is true, because if there's already a consensus and of truth, then it's not so important. But it's important to disrupt where there's falsehood, particularly if it's mischievous and particularly if it's dangerous and is causing us harm. And more importantly, also if it is something other people are not confronting. If it is something, a challenging job, unpopular job, somebody has to do it, people are not doing it, and it's a difficult thing, lot of hard work, risky, then that's the kind of thing I thrive to do on doing. Reason being that if I were in this for some kind of professional objective or political objective, then I could be settled for something less and feel that I'm just doing my job. But I left a business career, a professional career at the peak because I had a spiritual transformation thanks to my guru. And then I decided, and then there was no preconceived idea where I'm going to end up, but I was just led one step at a time. I was given the inspiration to do things, very simple things. After that, inspiration to do other things and other things. So after a long story, which I won't get into, I ended up in this pursuit. So the idea of taking on very complex problems, tough problems, risky problems comes sort of very natural, and I don't think that people tell me I'm at risk, and people tell me that a lot of things can go wrong, but I don't feel that way. I just feel that I'm doing what's natural for me, and this is what I continue doing. So the first book was the result of a lot of arguments I had with academic scholars of Hinduism. Religious studies is not in the Indian Academy because we have a strange idea of secularism, so we don't teach religion. But in other countries, religious studies is a very major topic of academic work in the universities. There are departments that teach all the different religions, try to be objective. Whether they are is a different matter, but they try to be objective. So I started a very detailed survey of how different religions are taught. And I found that Hinduism is the only major religion which is taught from the outside rather than from the inside. Rather than the insider's point of view, the Hindu practitioner's point of view, it is taught how people who don't like Hinduism, who are trying to convert people, who are Marxists, who are leftists, who feel that they should leave Hinduism, who are secularists, it's all their point of view being taught. Whereas this is not the case with other religions. So I looked at various themes that are being taught, and I found out who are the leaders on each theme. Each theme of depicting Hinduism is almost like a very well-defined sampradaya in the academy. There are some leaders, they're teaching young scholars, they go and write books, they get jobs, they have journals, conferences. So this thing spreads. It spreads into media, it spreads into education system. So I took on some of these major persons that I felt were completely wrong and very mischievous in portraying Hinduism. And out of their arguments, and some of these arguments turned into a front page article in the Washington Post. I became famous as somebody that is on the front page of the Washington Post as a troublemaker. So a lot of people called me and said, oh, you know, you made it now because now you're on the front page as a troublemaker. So I would go to big conferences and raise issues, basically, raise issues. And very serious, polite, diplomatic, not rude, but factual, holding my ground factually. So this led to a book called Invading the Sacred. Invading the Sacred is a book that has been out there for several years. And this talks about the academic denigration and demonology on Hinduism, large book. Then the second book is called Being Different, which is available outside. And Being Different is a different idea. It talks about, Breaking India. Second book was Breaking India, which is also outside. Breaking India talks about the integrity and unity of India being broken, at least intellectual unity of India being broken by a whole series of activities which I call the nexus. This nexus talks about Aryan-Dravidian divide, talks about Dalit divide, talks about minority issues, talks about all kind of regional divides, and the depiction of Hinduism and of Indian civilization is that it is a real troublemaking ideology, and the sooner you get rid of it, the better. And the people who are behind this are very powerful people. I named them. Some are in the US, political people, think tanks, Ford Foundation, Congress, senators, these kind of people. Some are Europeans in different countries, I named them. A lot of people in India, I named them. And the nexus, how they are organized, how they are working together, is the theme of this book. It started when I had a lunch with a professor in Princeton. I live in Princeton, and he told me he's come from India. So we started talking, and he said, I asked him, what were you doing there? He said, I was part of the Afro-Dalit project, Afro-Dravidian project. So I said, what is this? I never heard of such a project. And he said, oh, it's a project to explain to Indian people in the South that they are part of the Africans who came there, and the other people are Europeans who came, that's Aryans. And so this divide between Aryan and Dravidian is like the black and white, the racism in America. So we're going to liberate the Indians. We're going to liberate the Indians from their oppression. So it was very mischievous. I thought this must be kind of something marginal and something silly. So I started investigating who's doing it, where their funding comes from, what activities they're doing. And I was amazed how large scale this activity is, how many organizations are involved in it. And I started compiling their literature. It was a huge amount of information I had, and I started researching it. And then I started finding out where in India they're giving their money. And I got some people in India to help me locate where the money goes, how the money is spent. Then I came to India to research. And so I put together a global picture of what is happening outside India, what is happening in India, how people are connected in this project, how they are giving youth training, empowerment training, leadership training under the name of these very nice sounding activities. They're actually breaking India intellectually. So this was a big discovery, and I wrote this book. And the map of balkanized India was on his cover, on his wall, this professor's wall. He was a very nice diplomatic fellow, very not thinking he's doing anything wrong. So that cover of that map, the image of that map, I wanted to put on the cover of Breaking India. And it took quite a lot of discussions and negotiations with the publisher. The original design was the whole cover was a big map, vulcanized. They started getting very nervous, what will people think? This is very sensational, maybe we'll get in trouble. So then we finally agreed they will put the map but make it very small, as if the small map is less dangerous, And they also put a disclaimer at the bottom of this, on the front cover, if you look carefully. I've never seen a book which has a disclaimer on the cover. Disclaimer says this map is not correct. Okay, so they said this way we don't get in trouble for putting a map like that. So anyway, this book became a bestseller. It's been reprinted 11 or 12 times in English. There's a Tamil edition, and now we are doing a Hindi edition, which Baba Ramdev interviewed me for 2 hours on Astha channel some months ago, him and me for 2 hours. That YouTube video is out there, and he wanted Hindi edition, and he said that the title should be Bharat ko todne ka shadyantra, which means conspiracy to break India. So he's quoting it many places in his talks. And of course the publisher got very nervous. No, that title is very sensational, but then we'll find a different publisher. So this is my second book. Then the third book is titled Being Different, and the translation in Kannada is the one being released today. It's already in Hindi, and it's being translated in some other languages, Marathi and so on. The main idea of being different is a philosophical book. It talks about what is distinct about dharmic civilization philosophically compared to Western and Abrahamic civilizations. It's not, the difference is not that we are superior. Difference is not that they are superior and we are inferior. It's like apple is different from an orange, but it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. But we are different. We have some distinctive qualities. Certain words in Sanskrit are non-translatable. There is no equivalent in English. And when you translate the Sanskrit word into English, it's a distortion. It doesn't mean the same thing. And you lose meaning. It has a different connotation when you express it in English. So that's an example of what is different. Each of these non-translatable Sanskrit words is like a huge ecosystem. A lot of meanings, a lot of context, a lot of deep understanding involved in one word. You could write a chapter, even a book on one word. It is so profound. So I don't want some of these words to be translated. I speak English, but these words I use as they are. I don't translate their English equivalent. But the purpose of this book is to show the difference of our philosophy. So I explain the sense of body that we have, the sense of self, how it's different from that in Judeo-Christianity and Islam, the idea of unity, the cosmic unity, how that is different, the idea of divine, Ishta Devata, the idea of dharma. Dharma is not the same as religion. I give a lot of chapters on dharma is not the same as religion. So this way I'm explaining principles that make our dharma different. Even though the dharma is very diverse within, many dharmas, many sampradayas, many ways of looking at things, but there is a commonality, and this commonality is different than the others. So only if you know what is your distinctiveness can you have an identity. If you don't know what's different, or if you're embarrassed of it, or you have a taboo about it, or you just simply, you don't think there is anything different, then how could you have a distinct identity? Then there's nothing worth defending. Then you're not even sure why it's worth fighting for. Because if you don't know what's different, then what are you fighting for? If everything is same, then how does it matter? It doesn't matter. So I find a lot of confusion among our own leaders, some of them, that on the one hand they say everything is same, on the other hand they're very concerned when somebody converts. So I've asked some of our people, you said everything is same, but then if somebody converts, it's no problem. No problem. In fact, we should all convert, then there'll be less confusion and problem in the world. And they say, no, that's no good. So I say, well, then it must make a difference. There must be some difference that concerns you. When somebody goes from X to Y, if it were the same, it would not matter. So since it matters, there must be some difference. So we should understand what that difference is. Then we know why we don't want to convert from X to Y. Then we know why it's worth protecting, and we can have a sense of identity. So this book is the result of many, many years, many debates, many discussions, both within our own people and with outsiders, as a result of which I crystallized these major areas of difference, and I wrote this book. Now this book became very highly read and studied in the American Academy. The same people who 10 years earlier I had a lot of fights and arguments with were inviting me to give panel discussions and tell them about this book. Judeo-Christian people, Western scholars wanted to understand my idea of what is different. And a very major Harvard professor who is the senior most Vatican Jesuit on Hinduism, he's their expert on Hinduism. He had an open discussion and panel debate with me, just the two of us. After that he says, you know, this book is non-ignorable. It is not ignorable. He's sending it to all his theologians and Christian scholars that they have to understand it and respond to it, because this is what they have learned. Then he arranged that the American Academy of Religion, which has an annual conference with about 12,000-13,000 people, scholars coming every year, is very prestigious, and very few people get to a slot to speak. One little talk is considered very prestigious. So he arranged something quite unprecedented, that there'll be a full panel discussion on this book, which is not something they usually don't do, taking one book and having many, many speakers, scholars, write critiques and articles and their views on this book. And then I was asked to respond to it. And then there is a Hindu-Christian Studies Society. It studies Hindu-Christian relations, and they decided that the annual issue of the 2013 issue of their journal, 2013 issue of their journal will be on this book and the different views written about this book by various scholars. Then I was approached by the International Journal of Hindu Studies, which is edited and published out of England by Springer or Brill, one of the international publishers. I don't remember which, but one of those. And they wanted to devote one issue to this book and have many scholars write comments and so on. So the book became a well-discussed, well-debated, well-argued book. A lot of universities prescribe it in their reading literature. Even like Delhi University Department of Psychology, MA course, they have prescribed this as part of the reading because it explains the psychology, the Indian ideas of mind, Indian ideas of self. So it is not sort of religion, it is also psychology. So Being Different is a very live and active book right now, very continuing in its popularity. And then the fourth one I've just released today. Today is the first public event. We've been talking about it previously. This is called Indra's Net. There's several events and several forums. Some are private, some are public. And so by the time I leave, I'm kind of halfway through this trip. It's very hectic, but also very exciting. I have many 4 or 5 trips here and there to different cities still to go. By the time I'm done and I leave, I think the book will have created a certain amount of stir and a certain amount of buzz, which is, I think, necessary to get a discussion started. So I'll tell you a little bit about now what this book is about. Indra's Net basically is a book about the philosophical and intellectual unity of India. That's what it's about. It's about the unity of India. I had not thought of writing this book until the American Academy of Religion discussion on my previous book, Being Different. In that discussion, I learnt from some of the Western scholars, some of the Indian scholars, who are really not very happy with Hinduism, that they were very upset that being different assumes a unity of dharma. And they said, how can you talk about unity of dharma? There's no unity, it's contradiction. This one contradicts that one, this one has a fight with that one. All the time they're fighting. There is no such thing as a unified view, unified philosophy. And there is no such thing as Hinduism. Then they said that Hinduism was constructed artificially by Swami Vivekananda. He constructed it during the British time because he wanted a national narrative which would unite India for political purposes. So Hinduism is a political construction. It's not a spiritual, dharmic construction at all. And they say that he did it because of inferiority complex. Indians were inferior to the British and felt that British have science. We don't have science. British are very charitable people, very civilized people, a lot of social programs. We don't have them. So Swami Vivekananda, because he had this inferiority complex, wanted to come up with something that could look like it's Indian, but he copied a lot of British ideas. So in order to show that we have science, he came up with this idea of Raj Yoga, that there is this yogic science, which is not true according to them. And he came up with this idea of Karma Yoga to mimic charity, Christian charity. And the argument they're giving is that Karma Yoga in the Gita is not helping other people. Karma Yoga in the Gita is to achieve one's own moksha, doing things to have one's own moksha. So it's a selfish thing. And Swami Vivekananda was very concerned that we do not help each other the way the Christians do. So he took Christian idea of charity and said we should be doing the same thing, and he repackaged it as Karma Yoga. So the narratives go on. I was very concerned about all this. So I came back and started figuring out where do these people get it from? Who told them all this? And I found that this has become a very common spin in Indian writings. You know, there's a Jaipur literary festival going on. There are literary festivals in Chennai, Mumbai, or everywhere. You look at the talk in those places, the pseudo-intellectual writers of India are all parroting this idea that Hinduism is a political construction today for oppressing people. And it's a construction that started with Vivekananda, and it was not there before the British. There was no concept of philosophical unified India. So if the Hindu philosophy is fabricated in the British era, then even India as a nation did not exist. It did not exist. It's an artificial construction, and it's a political construction which is causing harm. So if we disband it, dissolve it and disintegrate it, it will probably liberate people. So Hinduism is a problem, and getting rid of Hinduism would liberate people. This kind of a story, this kind of a perspective is very mainstream in media in India. You will notice it if you go confront people and go beneath the surface. You will notice this is what they are talking about. Most of the Hindus are trying to ignore this, trying to avoid it, trying to not face it because it's uncomfortable to face. And so my book is to bring out this issue loud and clear. The research I did on this theory, which is called the Neo-Hinduism theory, the theory that Hinduism is not really genuine religion, it is Neo-Hinduism, kind of like a phony thing. This research led to the origin of this thesis. This thesis started in Germany by somebody called Paul Hacker in the 1950s. Then it went to United States. A man called, a very famous philosopher of India, scholar of India, Halpfas, he took it on. Then somebody called Aghayanand Bharati. Aghayanand Bharati was an Austrian who became a Swami, and he had orange robes and he was initiated, and he was a Swami. And then I think he had some fight or some difficulty with the Ramakrishna mission. He left, or they asked him to leave. I don't know the details, but he then turned against Hinduism, started writing these kind of things. Then this thesis went to England. Somebody called Ursula King, who's an Anglican minister and also an expert on Hinduism. She started writing it. And finally, they trained a young Indian scholar of Advaita Vedanta named Rambachan, Anantanand Rambachan. They trained him. And he is now the leading exponent of this thesis of Neo-Hinduism. He's on the various committees. He represents Hinduism in the Tony Blair Foundation. He's on BBC. He's the Hindu representative in the Vatican. He's in many, many ashrams all over India teaching Advaita Vedanta. So he became the leading voice on why Vivekananda, in what he proved, he's trying to prove for his entire career for the last 30, 40 years, he's trying to prove that Vivekananda contradicts Adi Shankara. That is the basic point he's making. That Adi Shankara's Advaita Vedanta has certain principles, and Vivekananda is violating those principles. So the Vivekananda's project to unify various various strains, various ideas as a common foundation of Hinduism is not valid. This is his main point. So the book Indra's Net, part 1 is called Purva Paksha, and each major thinker of this neo-Hinduism gets a chapter, chapter by chapter, what they're saying, what is wrong with it, kind of thing. And then I explain how this system of thinking called neo-Hinduism went outside Sanskrit and religion and Indology and spread into the study of history, anthropology, political science, all kind of different fields that study India. And then it became part of the Indian narrative. Indians themselves, all the universities talk like this, all the universities. Even some Government of India websites, when they talk about the history of India, they talk like this. Even the syllabus in major universities like University of Delhi, University of Bombay, major syllabus talks like this. IGNOU has these kind of ideas in there, who we are, kind of. The who we are is a lot of fragmented people, a lot of hodgepodge people with no coherence or unity, and artificially put together under British times by Swami Vivekananda, and then this unity is taken over by the Hindutva politics for political purposes. So this is kind of the story of who we are. That is what is being propagated. So part 2 of the book is called Uttar Paksh, meaning my response. So there I'm going through each item that they are claiming and systematically proving that this is wrong. In fact, I'm showing that all the major philosophical ideas that Swami Vivekananda brought out existed long before colonial times. All these ideas are found in earlier pre-colonial Indian sources. I show that. And he basically put it together in a fresh way, in a new, different way he explained it, and he put it together in a modern light. But it's not that he fabricated something new. But there are books called Hinduism Was Manufactured, that kind of book. And they're bestsellers. You'll see people like Pankaj Mishra, who is a literary giant in India, very popular bestseller. People like this Ramachandra Guha, these kind of people writing like that. Shashi Tharoor kind of people writing these kind of things. Yeah, their idea of India is this. Khilnani, another one. There's a lot of them. So I have a chapter called the chorus line, in which I show that all these Indian people who are writing themselves are not scholars. They have no personal insight, knowledge, either experientially nor do they understand the text. They just quote these Western scholars as experts. So when I submitted this book proposal to the publisher, they said, oh, Vivekananda 150th anniversary tribute to Vivekananda, we've already published one. And they published a book by Jyotirmay Sharma, who is writing that this whole neo-Hinduism thesis, that is his idea about Vivekananda, and that is supposed to be a tribute to Vivekananda. So publisher did not even know what is what. This is how confused our people are. They said, you're writing a defense of Vivekananda, but we already published one. And I told them in a letter that this is opposing that guy's book. My book is giving a different view from that guy. So it created a big sensation in the publishing house that this guy is going to topple or argue against one of our big scholars. But they could not stop my book because my previous books have become bestsellers. So they have to carry this book because it's good business for them. So whether they like it or not ideologically, now it is not possible for them to say we won't publish it because they make a lot of money out of it. So I thank all of you who popularized my book because it makes the publisher take it seriously. So this popularity of a thesis called neo-Hinduism is so pervasive. Unfortunately, a lot of the Vivekananda celebrations during the anniversary year promoted and featured those kind of scholars. It's so insulting. There is a Dharma Civilization Foundation in Los Angeles, ironically run by Sangh people who are living in America, but not well informed. So they collected millions of dollars from Americans to create all these academic programs. And a visiting professorship of Swami Vivekananda has been given to one of the persons featured in my book as somebody whose writings are undermining the integrity of Swami Vivekananda. So you can imagine how misinformed our people are. So this book is trying to not only argue with our opponents, but our own people who tend to be quite ignorant. And so when I point this out, they haven't read those people carefully. They have not read Swami Vivekananda carefully. All they know is that the guy is a nice guy, he talks very nicely, he wears Indian clothes, he's got a tilak, and he talks, he can sing some bhajan or do something like that. So they're very mesmerized by that kind of thing. So today, the threat comes from people, some people are openly opposed and saying, okay, I don't like you and I'm opposed to you. But a more serious threat comes from people who pretend to be actually liking us. But their idea of liking us is something that undermines us. It's a very sophisticated way of undermining us by approving of us in a certain way. You see? So I call this digestion. In some of my books I call this digestion. Digestion means that, like, I love yoga and we turn it into Christian yoga. So I love it. It is very nice. I love it. Yeah? Well, how can you complain? It's very good. Yeah. So somebody wrote, one of these digestion guys wrote, Jesus is the fulfillment of the Vedas. Means Vedas are very good. Great. But Jesus comes and he fulfills that promise. You know? It means those texts are very good. Perfect. And now Jesus is fulfilling that. Which means that Vedas are like 1.0 and Jesus is like 2.0. So it's like saying that DOS is good. It's a good foundation. But now we got Windows. So we can upgrade. This is and our people who don't know the whole narrative of such a scholar will get confused when he comes and gives a talk about Vedas. Because that's all he'll talk about. He won't talk about the fulfillment part. He will just talk about the Vedas. He can quote, he can recite, he can argue. He's one of the best philosophers of Upanishads. He can talk all that and impress our people. But our people are just lazy. We haven't gone deep enough to understand the game, the full game being played. And therefore, so you see, in Breaking India, I pointed out that some of the best schools of Bharatanatyam are actually Christian Natyam. They're teaching the Bharatanatyam style, the story of Jesus and Mary, but in a sari and in dhoti and wearing Indian clothes and the same music, Indian music and dance, grammar, all of that you will not know unless you pay attention to the story. You don't know all this. So they teach 3 levels. One is the Hindu level, the Hindu version. Then the secular version. Secular version will be no religion. It will just be a story about human right violations against women, some feminist idea, some, caste discrimination, these kind of stories, but doing the same dance style. And then the third version is Christian stories. So they teach everybody all 3. And they tell them that you perform according to the audience. So if they come here, they'll perform the Hindu version. And they'll do a lot of fundraising, you'll give them a lot of money. And you won't know what else they're doing. This is happening with yoga. They learn Hindu yoga, they learn secular yoga, they learn Christian yoga. That's large thing going on. So this is what I call digestion. We're being digested. I have so many examples of this digestion that I'm writing several volumes on different examples of digestion. And because this project has become so big, it'll take many books. I'm thinking of writing a quick summary book, which just gives a simple summary. If I decide to do that, I can get it out quickly. Because there are so many fields of knowledge in which we've been digested. We've been digested in mathematics, science, astronomy, agriculture, things like Ayurveda, herbal medicine, things like, even bells in church. Church bells did not come from the Jewish tradition which Christianity comes from, because there are no bells in Jewish temple. There are no bells. The bells and the metallurgy to make that kind of a bell, that kind of a sound, symmetry, did not exist in Europe at that time. India had that metallurgy. And Emperor Ashoka used to give bells. He used to send emissaries to different parts of the world and gift bells. So some of the early church bells were from India, made in India. The idea of monks living in monasteries. Christianity did not get monastery, the idea of a monastery from Judaism, because there's no monastery in Judaism. The rabbis do not live in a monastery traditionally. So this idea came from Buddhists, because they were Buddhists living in monasteries. So if you look at some of the early stories, Aesop's fables, famous Aesop's fables, are from Indian origin. You look at the influence of Sanskrit, and today there is a young man here who gave me his book. There is a new field called computational linguistics. Computational linguistics. It starts with great praise for Sanskrit. It's the most computer-friendly language. Okay? And a lot of money, a lot of Western scholars in different fields interested in this. So Indians get very excited. A whole lot of grants start coming. JNU Sanskrit department is one of the nexuses, one of the nodal agencies coordinating for Germans and Americans, this computational linguistics. Everybody is very happy. Our Sanskrit is going to become very popular. What they do in computational linguistics is to reduce the number of sounds, the alphabetic sounds in Sanskrit, to a smaller number. Because you cannot map them onto English 26 alphabets. You cannot. We have more than that. So some of the intonations get lost, which for us is a very serious problem. You cannot get rid of the intonation. The intonation of a mantra is very important. And the bhav with which you are saying the mantra, and where you are when you say the mantra, the whole context and environment is very important. So in computational linguists, they throw all that out, which means they're de-Hinduizing it. They're reducing it, simplifying it, getting rid of all those things because they cannot accommodate them in their way of thinking. So this computational linguistics is taking Panini's grammar and turning it into something which has no trace of Panini and no trace of Sanskrit left. It is kind of a meta language, a meta grammar, which does not have the Indian sources visible at all. So they're picking our brain, mapping it into something else, which takes some of these ideas. Now, why do they want to do this? They want to do this because one of the biggest applications, which will be one of the biggest money-making applications in the near future, is natural language translation. So I speak in English and it comes out in Japanese. The guy speaks in Japanese, it comes out in English. Korean speaks and it comes out in German. German answers, it comes back in Korean. Real time, no delay, like maybe a trivial fraction of a second delay. It's almost like we're talking to each other. This will be such a huge application in terms of smartphones, in terms of live TV, in terms of, you won't need translators and there'll be no delay. There'll be no delay of this. And you can enter books in one language, get them translated in another language, automatic language translation. Now they found that Panini's grammar is the most sophisticated and complete engine, linguistic engine. So you can take a language, map it into this, and then map it from here to another language. So you can go back and forth. To translate, you go into Panini's grammar, then Panini's structure, and then out, and so on. The tragedy is that the whole Sanskrit is being used, is the basis of this engine, and what will come out will be products that have nothing to do with Sanskrit. This will be made in USA, made in Germany, technology, linguistic, language translation and things like that. And our people will have made a bunch of money. They're getting a lot of grants, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they'll be sitting retired. Of course, the next generation will not even know that this happened. This is an example of digestion. This is an example of what I'm researching and pointing out. And this is happening in fields like mental health, neuroscience, psychology. Psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, at the cutting edge are doing research on yogis, Buddhist meditators. they're looking at their philosophical arguments, the scientific makeup of the mind and how it works according to Hindu, Buddhist texts. They're looking at that, and they're looking at the actual experiential results of these advanced meditators, doing a lot of scans and a lot of measurements, and translating it into what they're calling Western science. Western science. So the irony is that when I talk like this, the Western scientists who are doing it, they know what I'm talking about. They know. They may not like it. Some of them get apologetic. Some of them get defensive. Some of them even agree with me. But they say that's how it is, you know. But the irony is that our people who are involved in it don't know this is going on. They think we are helping to expand our reach. So there was a conference in Delhi 2 weeks ago by a Hindu nationalist organization called Decolonizing the Indian Mind with Purva Paksha. Exactly the thing I'm writing in Being Different. Somehow these things are becoming popular. And in that conference, after discussing all these ideas, the two speakers conclude that we don't have to worry at all, because what I call digestion, they call, we are spreading everywhere. Everywhere our ideas are being adopted. And even if Hinduism finishes in India, it will survive in the form of many people taking these ideas. So I said, this is like a foolish goat who says, even if the tiger eats us all, we will live in the stomach of the tiger. So the idea being that you have the image as a tiger, there's a stomach, and inside is the image of a goat who's sitting there very happy and having a joyride, you know, tiger. We are sitting in this tiger, wow, you know, we're having a cool time. But if you look at the examples of people who've been digested, pagan people got digested into Christianity. The Christmas tree comes from pagan. Pagan religions were the ones before Christianity in Europe, they were pagan religions. Celtics, Druids, many pagan communities were there. They got digested. Pagan people disappeared. There are no more pagan people, very few left. But their ideas got assimilated into Christianity. Even this Valentine's Day, even this Easter, they're pagan festivals. A lot of the rituals and ideas in Christianity are pagan. So when a predator eats a prey, he takes the things that are useful and makes them part of his own DNA. He makes them part of his own body, his cells take over whatever nourishment and nutrients he could get from that prey. And whatever he doesn't need, whatever doesn't fit is rejected and thrown out. So when a civilization gets digested, the civilization in its original form disappears. So it could be that in the future there will be no more Diwali as we know it. It will be some kind of a festival of lights celebrated as some kind of fun with cocktail parties and dance and a lot of good stuff, you know. And the status of Ram and Sita and Hanuman will be, people will dress up in these masks and have funny things going on. So we could be digested. And there are foolish people among us who think this is very good. This will be great. We'll get digested. Everywhere we will be, in some form we will be present. The issue is, we will not have our integrity, our sovereignty as Hindu people. Elements will be digested and become part of Christian yoga. Element will be digested and become part of vegetarianism, not as a spiritual tradition, but for health purposes. Vegetarianism is on the rise in the United States, for example, but as a purely health thing, because medically they're saying that's better for you. Whereas for us, there's a whole philosophy of nature, animals, and so on. Their idea of vegetarianism is not because of that, it's something else. So when a civilization gets digested, it is destroyed. Digestion is a form of destruction. And the fact that the colonizer, the person who's taking you over, uses these good things doesn't mean it's good for us, because it's no longer ours. We cease to exist as who we are. So this Indra's net is a concerted response to the forces that are saying we do not have unity. One of the techniques, one of the important ways of digesting somebody, destroying somebody, is to claim that they don't have any unity, they don't have any coherence, they don't have any continuity, And so you can take a piece from here and a piece from there, gobble this, gobble that, digest this, distort that, appropriate that, because there is no unified thing anyway. There is nothing unified there. So this is now a very common, mainstream, normal way of discussing Hinduism in intellectual circles also in India. And the purpose of writing this Indra's Net is to resist that. And the central hero of the book is Swami Vivekananda, and I wrote it in his 150th anniversary to bring this up. One of my final stops in this trip will be Calcutta, where I'll discuss this with the Swamis of the Ramakrishna Mission. And while doing my research for this book, I approached some people in the Ramakrishna Mission. They had no concept of the problem. I am solving a problem they don't know exists. So it's like a doctor comes to you and says, I have a solution to your illness. I have made a breakthrough. And the patient says, I don't have an illness. So what is he going to do? So first my job, I have two jobs. First I have to show there is a problem. This is going on. And they are in denial. They don't want to admit this is going on. Some of them know it. When I tell them these scholars are writing this, they say, yeah, we know it. But they don't want to deal with it. But when the problem comes right into their doorstep, local media is making fun, local academics, school system, history textbooks are giving a distorted view. These are all the results of a fundamentally erroneous depiction of Hindu philosophy. Fundamental errors in the way they're treating Hindu philosophy lead to all these distorted outcomes. So if you want to fight, you should also go to the root of the problem. Otherwise, if you have polluted tap water, you can keep filtering every tap water here, there. But you really need to go to the tank where all this is coming from. If the tank is polluted, you have to go there and solve the problem. So I'm going to the root of the problem and finding the people and the ideas and the books that are responsible for it and giving a direct response from my side. And that to me is what Swami Vivekananda deserves in his 150th year. So that is what I'm trying to do. I'll conclude by saying one more time that it was very unfortunate that a good number of the felicitations of Swami Vivekananda during the anniversary year, especially in the United States, were done by people whose work is very cynical towards him and undermines, but in a very polite way, very sort of diplomatic way, but undermines him. For instance, people will say, Swami Vivekananda was such a great man. He created a new religion out of nothing. What a great man. Now this is an insult to somebody because it shows that he is phony. But you have to understand what the intention is, you see. Yet it can be said to make it look like, oh, we honor this man who took a nation which had no tradition and gave it one tradition, like that. So you see, our own people, because of the double talk, want to believe that these guys are helping us, want to be on their side, want to be in their good books, want to have photographs taken which can hit the newspapers that have become important in University of Southern California or something like that. So this kind of inferiority complex for our own people is driving this kind of behavior. So I would like you to read the book, and this book is not only a defense of Vivekananda, it is a defense of Hindu philosophy, it is a defense of India's unity, it is a defense of who we are as a people, what would be called the historical grand narrative of India. It is the historical grand narrative of India cannot exist without a unified integrity of Hinduism. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. That was pretty stirring up each one of us. In fact, that's one big trait of Rajiv ji. He doesn't let you be in your comfort zone. Agree or disagree, he makes you think.